Hello everyone. For this video, I decided to read the article entitled, "The Lord is a Man of War, Moses, the Exodus, and the Spirit of 76" by James Bird. Through this article, Bird is talking about how preachers compared the colonists to the Israelites in the Exodus in the Old Testament, and King George III to Pharaoh, and the British were seen as trying to enslave the American colonists through taxation without representation, and that whole liberation narrative from Exodus was preached. Even Abigail Adams and John Adams wrote about the parallels in some of their letters. It's very interesting. In May of 1776, John commented on a sermon that featured a parallel between the case of Israel and that of America, and between the conduct of Pharaoh and that of King George III. So throughout that whole sermon, they were using the Israelites and the Exodus narrative to show that God was on the side of the colonists and the patriots, and suppressed and enslaved peoples. John wrote to Abigail Adams 4 months later, and as they were trying to put together the new nation, and wrote that Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson had each proposed designs for the Great Seal of, well, they were calling them the Confederated States at that time, featuring the Exodus as a motif. So I find it very ironic, actually, that both of the deists who saw God as a clockmaker, just letting it run, saw parallels from where God moved in the Old Testament and freed Israelites from the clutches of the Egyptians. So another part of the irony here is that in the case of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams anyway, is that most of the parallels are actually based right out of Exodus 15 verse 3, and that says, Adonai is a warrior, Adonai is his name, and that's the whole verse. And so a lot of the colonial preachers were taking this one verse and expanding on it to go with this Exodus narrative. So it basically talks about how the Lord is a man of war. They took this to mean that God was a fighter, not just a deity who approved of violence as an ends to a means, but as an active participant in combat. And we see that elsewhere in Scripture as well, with the angel of the Lord and so on and so forth. Most of the people preaching Exodus 15:3 believed in divine intervention in the American Revolution, which is why it's so ironic that Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, who were both deists, also used the Exodus as a narrative. And it was often cited against pacifists as well, saying that they should participate in the fighting in the Revolution because God himself fought. Didn't just condone fighting, but God fought. Often, when the weather turned against the Redcoats, it was preached as the hand of God being on the side of the patriots. Now, what I got from this whole narrative, I sometimes feel that they kind of took Exodus 15 verse 3 out of context. Yes, it does say God is a fighter, but he is the verse that they're quoting there is actually part of a song that Moses and Miriam are singing as they're being freed. And I do believe that God does work in our lives and does have an active hand, unlike the deists. However, it's difficult to say that God chooses one side over the other when it's Christian nation fighting Christian nation. However, the colonists would not have seen it this way. They saw themselves as enslaved and oppressed. Thank you.